Billionaire rode the elevator with his fiancée. Then his ex walked in carrying twins who looked just like him. Alexis didn't walk into the marble lobby of Theodore's corporate tower expecting her heartbeat to misbehave. She was too focused on keeping Caitlin's juice box from leaking through her purse and making sure Nathaniel didn't lose his tiny shoe again. Most mornings were a blur, but this morning came with a strange tightness in her chest, the kind that whispers something is off even when the world looks calm. The glass doors slid behind her with a hush, sealing her inside a space that belonged to a different world. A colder one. The floor gleamed like someone had polished it strictly for people with corner office names. Suits moved around her with clipped strides and half smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They glanced at her stroller, curious, polite, lightly judging, a look Alexis had grown used to in spaces that were never designed with women like her in mind. She pushed forward anyway. Timing mattered when you were raising twins alone. Late meant consequences, and consequences meant stress she didn't have room for. But that uneasy feeling kept sliding up her spine. One hand guided the stroller. The other pressed against her chest for a quick second, trying to steady a heartbeat that felt a step ahead of her. She didn't know why it was happening, or why she suddenly remembered the way she once squeezed Theodore's hand during quiet moments, seeking reassurance she never fully received. It had been years since she walked away from a future she thought she'd build with him. Years since she realized she would be bringing two little lives into the world without him by her side. She told everyone she didn't think about him anymore, that the past was buried, that she'd moved on, but her heart still carried questions it never got to ask. Questions about the night everything collapsed, questions about whether Theodore ever wondered about the twins, or the way Caitlin scrunched her nose exactly like he used to when concentrating. Questions about Nathaniel's gentle curiosity, the trait she once teased Theodore about having since childhood. Those thoughts weren't supposed to be here. Not today. Not in this lobby filled with briefcases, badge scans, and the hum of money moving through walls. She shook the feeling away and headed toward the elevator bank. The contrast hit her again, South Atlanta warmth still clinging to her clothes, the scent of cocoa butter on the twins, their soft curls brushing the air against a backdrop of glass partitions and sharp edges. She pressed the call button. A tone sounded, and the elevator doors opened. Her stomach tightened. Inside stood Theodore, with his fiancée beside him. Her breath caught before she could stop it. He looked exactly how she remembered, tailored, centered, carrying that effortless polish of a man raised in an upper-class world where problems were handled quietly and emotions were tucked away like private letters. For a second, she didn't move. Her heartbeat jumped so sharply it felt like someone tugged it. She could have turned around. She could have walked back out the building and tried again another day. But survival didn't work like that. She stepped inside. The temperature seemed to shift the moment she crossed the threshold. Not colder, just heavier. Her twins looked up at the tall man in front of them, two sets of storm gray eyes widening at the same time. Theodore froze. Alexis froze. His fiancée's expression sharpened with confusion. Caitlin tugged gently on Alexis' sleeve, her small voice lifting into the tight silence. "Mommy, why is that man staring at me?" The question cracked the whole moment wide open. Theodore's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in recognition he could no longer hide. Alexis felt the air close around her, her pulse quickening as her thoughts echoed. "Please, not today, not like this." No explanation followed, no introduction, no confession, just one impossible moment, holding 3 years of unsaid truth. Before we go any deeper into what happened in that elevator, if stories like this ever touch your heart, tap that like button. It helps these stories reach someone who may need the reminder that life has a way of bringing truth back to your doorstep, even when you're not ready. Welcome to Mr. Graham Stories, where real stories meet real life lessons. Every video is crafted to inspire, challenge, and stay with you long after it ends. If you believe in growth, second chances, and meaningful storytelling, you're home. Subscribe, like the video, and tell us the time and where you're watching from. The elevator felt too small for the weight inside it. Not physically, there was enough space for all of them, but emotionally it felt like stepping into a memory that had been waiting with its arms crossed. Alexis tried to steady her breathing as the door slid shut behind her, sealing her into a moment she didn't volunteer for. Her fingers tightened around the stroller handle. Caitlin leaned into her side, sensing the tension in that way children do, quiet, watchful, instinctive. Theodore didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't even shift his weight. He just stared at the twins with a look Alexis remembered from long ago, a mixture of shock, recognition, and something deeper. A softness he used to show only when he let his guard down. His fiancée finally looked up at him. "Theodore," she whispered, as if afraid her voice might break something fragile in the air. He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Caitlin and Nathaniel, the way someone stares at a truth they weren't prepared to face. Alexis could almost feel his heartbeat thudding across the small space. She lifted her chin slightly, gathering whatever strength she had left. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said quietly. It was the simplest sentence she could manage. Any longer and her voice might have betrayed her. Theodore swallowed hard, the movement tight along his jaw. "Lex," he breathed, barely audible. The nickname hit her like a memory she hadn't braced for. She closed her eyes for half a second, grounding herself, reminding her heart that this was not 3 years ago. This was not the man she once trusted. His fiancée's gaze darted between them, confusion shifting into something sharper, not anger yet, but a realization that this encounter wasn't casual. Caitlin stared at Theodore with bold curiosity. Nathaniel mirrored her, small fingers gripping the stroller edge. They had no idea how much of this moment was about them. The elevator hummed softly as it moved upward, but the silence inside it felt like a held breath. Alexis kept her gaze forward, refusing to get pulled into old emotions. This was business. This was paperwork. This was her trying to get through her day. But Theodore's whisper lingered in her chest. He looked at her the way he used to, the way he did when he thought she didn't notice, as if her presence made the rest of the world fade. She couldn't afford to let that affect her now. Not when she'd spent 3 years piecing her life together, learning how to raise twins on courage and determination, building a routine that didn't include him. Theodore cleared his throat. A small, shaky sound, nothing like the confident boardroom voice he was known for. How have you been?" he asked, a simple question with too much history behind it. Alexis didn't trust her voice yet, so she kept her tone measured. "Busy," she replied. Nathaniel tugged on the sleeve of her jean jacket. "Mommy," he said softly, "why does he look like us?" Theodore's fiancée inhaled sharply. The sentence hit the billionaire like someone had reached inside his chest and gripped something tender. His hand twitched at his side. His eyes glistened, not tears, but the fight against them. He stared at Nathaniel, then at Caitlin, then at Alexis, silently asking a question none of them had the strength to answer in this space. Alexis tightened her arm around her son gently. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "let's talk about it later, okay?" But the question lingered in the elevator, like it had nowhere else to go. Theodore's fiancée finally spoke, breaking the tension holding them all hostage. "Theodore, what is happening right now?" Her voice cracked in the middle. Not dramatic, just honest. He still didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing across years of absence, choices he thought were behind him, a woman he once loved deeply, and 2 children with eyes he instantly recognized as his own. The elevator slowed. The digital numbers above the door flashed. Alexis felt her pulse rise again, heart knocking at her ribs. The moment the elevator reached the next floor, the moment the bell chimed, she knew her life was about to shift in ways she hadn't prepared for. But she kept her expression steady, her tone calm, her body grounded. Survival had taught her how to hold herself up when the world pressed down. The doors opened with a soft tone, spilling light into the tight space. No one moved, not at first, because sometimes the hardest part isn't the truth itself, it's stepping out of the moment where the truth first revealed itself. Before we move forward, if this moment has already pulled your heart in, take a second to like this video. It helps these stories find the people who connect with them the most. The hallway outside the elevator was bright, but it didn't feel welcoming. Light spilled across the polished floor, yet the atmosphere carried the weight of something left unfinished, something that refused to stay quiet. Alexis guided the stroller forward first, mostly because she needed to move. Standing still inside that elevator felt like tempting a collapse she couldn't afford. Her pulse thudded against her ribs as she stepped into the corridor. She focused on breathing evenly, on keeping her shoulders straight, on holding herself together the way motherhood had taught her. But behind her, Theodore hesitated. His fiancée touched his arm gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "Theodore, talk to me." He didn't respond. His eyes were still locked on the twins, who were now looking around with innocent interest, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the adults' chests. Alexis kept walking. Her feet knew what to do, even when her heart didn't. But the sound of Theodore's voice caught up to her, low, unsteady, almost disbelieving. "Lex, wait." It wasn't a command. It wasn't an accusation. It was a plea. Alexis froze for a second, her spine tightening. She had prayed she wouldn't have to hear that voice say her name today. She had prayed for a simple morning, drop off paperwork, keep life moving, stay in control. But control was already slipping. She turned halfway, keeping one hand on the stroller. "Theodore," she said, calm but guarded. "I'm really not trying to make a scene." His fiancée stepped fully beside him now, eyes searching Alexis for answers she didn't want to give. "Do you two know each other?" she asked. Her tone wasn't hostile, just confused, suddenly understanding that something behind those elevator doors had shifted her world too. Alexis inhaled slowly. "Yes," she answered. Her voice remained steady even as her chest tightened. "We knew each other a long time ago." Caitlin looked up at her mother, then at Theodore again, her small brows scrunching the way his did when he concentrated. "Mommy," she whispered, tugging Alexis's sleeve, "why did that man say your name like that?" Alexis's breath hitched, not in fear, not in embarrassment, in truth, because children often spoke the things adults tried to hide. Theodore took a step closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough to show he wasn't letting the moment slip away. His voice cracked on the words he'd been holding since the elevator ride. "Alexis, those children, they—" Alexis cut him off, her tone gentle but firm. "Not here." She glanced around. Employees walked past with curious eyes. Someone slowed down just enough to stare at Theodore, then the twins, then Alexis, putting pieces together they had no right to. This was not the place for a conversation that could fracture multiple lives at once. Theodore followed her gaze and suddenly saw it the way she did. The whispered assumptions, the sideways looks, the judgment that always targeted the woman first. A protective tension lit behind his expression. Something primal. Something he hadn't shown in years. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Somewhere private." His fiancée stepped in front of him now, her voice a mixture of fear and uncertainty. "Theodore, what is going on?" Her question echoed in the hallway. A question Alexis wished she didn't have to be part of. Alexis didn't want drama, didn't want explanations delivered in a crowded corridor, didn't want to watch a woman's heart splinter in front of her. She just wanted to breathe. She steadied her voice. "All I'm trying to do is handle my business and get my kids home safely. That's it." But even as she said it, she knew nothing about this day would stay simple now. Nathaniel reached out a small hand toward Theodore again, curious, brave, unaware of everything he mirrored. Theodore's breath trembled. His fiancée's eyes widened at the gesture. The moment lingered between them, delicate and dangerous. "Before the truth unfolds deeper, let me say this. If you're watching and feeling this tension the way we feel it telling the story, tap that like button. It helps these moments reach someone who might be living a version of this themselves." Alexis exhaled slowly, her voice soft but definitive. "We can talk," she said, "but not here." Theodore gave a single nod. "Lead the way." And in that second, with Caitlin resting against her mother, Nathaniel peeking over the edge of the stroller, and Theodore standing caught between his past and his future, the real story began. Alexis had learned that real strength didn't always come with noise. Most days, it came in quiet moments, in the soft hours of the morning when the world hadn't fully woken up, but her twins already had. Her day began the way it always did on the south side, with Caitlin humming some half-remembered tune while sitting on the kitchen counter, and Nathaniel tugging at the bottom drawer where she kept old plastic lids he liked, stacking into leaning towers. The apartment smelled faintly of the lavender spray she used at night and the waffles she made that morning, the same brand she'd been buying ever since the twins started chewing solid food. She had a routine: open the curtains, let the sunlight in, straighten the couch pillows, check their backpacks, check her email, tie Caitlin's shoes, fix Nathaniel's collar, and remind herself she could do this, even when exhaustion pressed on her shoulders. But today had started sideways. First, the juice box in her purse leaked across the corner of her paperwork. Then, Caitlin lost her hair tie. And Nathaniel insisted on bringing the same stuffed bear she'd tried to leave at home, because it was missing an eye and held together by one strong thread. Little problems, ordinary ones, but today they felt heavier. Still, she moved through the morning with practiced motion, wiping, cleaning, adjusting, guiding, the word late buzzing quietly in her mind. She bundled the twins into their jackets and stepped outside, locking the apartment behind her. The hallway carried the usual blend of footsteps, Saturday gossip, and the low hum of some neighbor's TV. People nodded to her like they always did, acknowledging her without prying. Life here was familiar, imperfect but warm. But as she walked toward the bus stop with the twins' stroller rolling over uneven pavement, that strange uneasiness returned. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like her heart was nudging her about something she couldn't name. Nathaniel kicked his little legs, tapping his shoes together with excitement. Caitlin pointed out the mural across the street, bright colors dancing across a brick wall, painted by a local youth group. "Mommy, that looks like Auntie Tia's house." Caitlin said, giggling. Alexis smiled. I know, baby. Same colors. She breathed in, letting the cool morning air steady her nerves. She had things to do today, important things. She couldn't afford to let a strange feeling slow her down. The bus ride into downtown Atlanta was smooth enough, though the twins asked 100 questions about the big buildings and why people wore suits this early. By the time they reached Theodore's tower, a building she usually avoided being near, Alexis had her resolve tucked neatly behind her calm expression. The structure rose into the sky, shaped in clean lines and reflective panels. The entrance alone felt like a transition into a different world, one built on money, legacy, and a sense of separation she'd grown familiar with. She stepped through the revolving door, the twins quieting in the presence of all that polished order. Inside, the lobby sat cool and still, a place where everything had a purpose. A receptionist typed quickly behind a long counter. Tall plants stood in corners as if chosen to match the exact shade of the marble floor. People moved with purpose, checking watches, tapping phones, avoiding eye contact. Alexis felt every pair of eyes flicker toward her in passing. Not rude, not invasive, just curious. A black mother with a stroller stood out here, not because she didn't belong, but because this space wasn't built with her daily life in mind. She pressed her lips together, adjusting the strap of her purse on her shoulder. She had seen those looks before, in banks, in stores up north, in school meetings. They said, I notice you, without saying much else. The twins didn't notice any of it. Nathaniel's head swiveled as he watched the way the lights glimmered off the floor. Caitlin pointed at a pair of women walking in matching pencil skirts. Mommy, look. They look like they're going somewhere fancy. Alexis gave a small chuckle. Most people here look like that. A security guard nodded politely as she approached the elevator bank. She nodded back, grateful for the simple acknowledgement. That uneasiness pressed against her again, brushing her ribcage from the inside. She ignored it. She needed to drop off paperwork. That was all. In and out. She reached the elevator and shifted her weight slightly, rocking the stroller so Nathaniel wouldn't fidget too hard. The button glowed white when she pressed it. Her heartbeat tightened, not racing, just uneven. Like the rhythm had its own opinion today. She reminded herself that this was nothing more than an errand, nothing more than a building with too much glass and not enough warmth. Still, the moment her thumb tapped the elevator call button, an old memory flashed across her thoughts, the way she used to squeeze Theodore's hand when she was nervous. He'd always looked down at her, puzzled at how something so small could comfort her. But she'd needed it. She'd needed him. She shook the memory away before it fully formed. Life had shifted since then. She had shifted. The elevator bell chimed. The doors began to glide open, and the moment felt stretched thin, like a second that lasted longer than it should. For a heartbeat, she only saw the inside of the elevator, the metal railing, the mirrored panel, the soft lighting. Then she saw him, Theodore, standing tall in a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, the quiet assurance of wealth wrapped around him like it belonged there. His fiancée stood beside him, holding a folder, mid-sentence. Alexis's breath hitched before she could stop it. Her fingers tightened around the stroller handle. She hadn't seen him in years. Years of growing, hurting, healing, fighting, and surviving. A part of her wanted to step back, but her feet didn't move. Her throat tightened, and the uneasiness she'd felt all morning finally made sense. She pushed the stroller forward. Theodore turned toward her. His entire expression shifted, not gradually but immediately, like someone had reached inside and flipped a switch. Caitlin looked up at him. Nathaniel followed, two sets of gray eyes meeting the man whose reflection lived in each of them. Theodore froze. Alexis froze. His fiancée's confused gaze landed on her, then the twins, then him. The moment felt both agonizingly still and dangerously loud. The elevator doors slid shut behind them, and Alexis knew everything she tried to protect, everything she tried to bury, everything she thought she could avoid, was about to surface whether she wanted it to or not. Theodore Wallace began his morning the way he always did. Deliberate steps, thoughtful movements, a routine that had been crafted for efficiency rather than joy. His penthouse kitchen smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and lemon-scented cleaner. Classical music drifted from the living room speakers, a playlist curated for calm, something his fiancée said made him appear centered and respectable, whatever that truly meant. He didn't argue. He rarely did. He reached for his mug, the one engraved with the Wallace family crest, polished so often it almost shined. He poured oat milk into the cup, stirred it once, and set the spoon down precisely parallel with the napkin. Another habit learned from a childhood where everything had rules. His fiancée moved around the kitchen island in a crisp blouse, flipping through a binder of fabric samples. "So," she said brightly, "I'm thinking ivory for the guest tables, or maybe soft beige." The decorator said either color photographs well. "What do you think?" Theodore nodded politely. "Whichever you prefer." He meant it. Not because he didn't care, but because decisions about table linens never moved him. His mornings had become a parade of wedding details. Cakes, flowers, seating arrangements, menu tastings, all important, all expected. None of them stirred anything inside him. His fiancée held up 2 swatches. "This one feels too warm, and this one's too plain. Maybe a blend? Do you think we should—" Her voice faded slightly as Theodore drifted for a moment, not away from her, but away from the conversation. Something tugged at the edges of his mind. It had been happening more often lately. A thought, a memory, a face. He pushed it aside before it formed completely. "Are you listening?" she asked gently. "Of course," he replied, straightening slightly. "I trust your judgment." She smiled, satisfied, reassured, and returned to her binder. Theodore took a slow sip of his coffee. Warm, smooth, predictable. But beneath the predictability lay a tension he couldn't name. It had been growing over the past few weeks, uninvited and unwelcome. Like an inner shift he didn't fully understand. He tried to blame it on work, expansion plans, board pressure, shareholder expectations, but none of those felt heavy enough to explain the way certain memories crept back at night. Memories of someone who once made mornings feel wider, lighter, alive. He set down his cup a little harder than intended. His fiancée looked up. "Everything okay?" "Yes," he replied. But even to his own ears, it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. She moved closer, resting her hand on his arm. "You've been distracted lately. Not in a bad way, just elsewhere. Is everything all right at the office?" "Fine," he said quickly. "Just a lot going on." She nodded. She didn't push. She never pushed. It was one of the first things he noticed about her when they started dating. Everything about her was refined, measured, composed. She had been raised in a world where feelings were folded neatly and stored out of view, and Theodore had slipped into that world seamlessly, maybe too seamlessly. He finished his coffee, grabbed his briefcase, and walked toward the door. "Don't forget," she called after him. "We're meeting the reception coordinator after your board session." "I remember," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. He stepped into the private elevator of their building, a sleek, stainless steel space he had ridden thousands of times. It hummed softly as it descended, the same familiar sound as always. But something about the morning felt out of place. A small imbalance, a shift in the air, a quiet reminder of something unfinished inside him. When he exited the building, his driver held the car door open. Theodore nodded in thanks, slid into the back seat, and opened his tablet to review his schedule. Lunch meeting, finance call, floor tour, press briefing, everything organized, everything controlled. Yet the nagging feeling persisted, threading through his ribs like a quiet knock. The car pulled up to the corporate tower, and the tall glass structure reflected the gray-blue sky above, imposing, familiar, steady. Security greeted him. Assistants hurried by with folders and tablets. The rhythm of downtown Atlanta rushed around him. Order, routine, normality, until the elevator ride to the upper floors changed everything. He stepped inside with his fiancée, who continued discussing wedding seating strategies. "Your cousin requested to be near the main stage. Should we accommodate that, or move him back a row? Oh, and your mother said she has opinions about the floral centerpieces." He nodded again. "Whatever keeps the peace." She laughed lightly. "You always say that." But he wasn't entirely listening. His mind had drifted again. A flicker of curly hair, a warm laugh, the scent of coconut oil and vanilla lotion he used to breathe in when someone hugged him tighter than anyone else ever had. He shook the thought off. His fiancée reached for his hand, and he held it reflexively, but the connection felt thinner than it used to. The elevator chimed as it passed the lobby. And then, the moment happened, the moment that split his morning cleanly in two. The doors slid open. The stroller appeared first, then the woman pushing it, then the 2 children inside, impossibly familiar faces staring up at him with wide gray eyes he recognized even before he realized he had stopped breathing. His fiancée inhaled sharply beside him. Alexis stepped inside. Her presence hit him like a jolt. Everything inside Theodore, the polished calm, the practiced control, the perfectly balanced morning, cracked. Suddenly, the classical music he'd listened to earlier felt distant. The wedding plans felt irrelevant. The coffee with oat milk tasted like nothing, because Alexis was here, and the twins were here. and his entire world shifted before he could gather himself. The elevator doors closed behind her. The elevator panel glowed softly above them, but the space itself had fallen into a silence so sharp it felt almost physical. The kind of silence that traps breath in the chest and forces every heartbeat to echo louder than it should. Alexis stood only a few feet from Theodore, yet it felt like the past had folded the space between them into a tight corner neither could escape. Her fingers curled around the stroller handle, grounding herself before the emotion rising in her chest could spill into her expression. Theodore's fiancée was the first to move, just a slight shift of her head, barely perceptible. But her eyes moved fast, darting from Alexis to the twins, then to Theodore, trying to decode an equation she had never prepared for. And Theodore, he didn't move at all. His breath had caught somewhere between his ribs and his throat, suspended. His eyes locked on the twins, traveling from their curls to their cheeks, to the shape of their tiny noses, to the storm-gray eyes staring right back at him. Not curious eyes, recognizing eyes. Those eyes shook something loose inside him. Caitlin blinked at him once, slow and soft, as if trying to place him in the world her mother never explained. Nathaniel tilted his head slightly, studying the tall man as though trying to match him to a memory he'd never been given. Alexis felt the weight of the moment pressing against her chest, not because she wasn't prepared to see Theodore again, but because she'd never imagined the meeting would happen this way, with her twins looking up with the same eyes that had once made her fall for the man standing frozen across from them. She swallowed carefully, lifting her chin enough to hide the tremble she felt deep within. The elevator hummed as it climbed, but the sound didn't register in anyone's mind. Every person within its walls was trapped in the same realization but experiencing it in entirely different ways. Theodore's fiancée finally whispered, "Who is she?" Her voice was soft, but the edge beneath it couldn't be hidden. It wasn't anger, it was confusion launching itself into fear. Theodore didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes refused to shift from the twins. He noticed things no one else would notice immediately, the way Caitlin scrunched her nose slightly when something surprised her, the exact same way he did when he was concentrating. The slight tilt in Nathaniel's smile, just a hint of what Theodore used to do as a boy when stirred by curiosity. These weren't coincidences. These were reflections. Alexis broke the stillness first. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, gripping the stroller until her knuckles tightened. "I'm just here to handle paperwork," she said quietly, refusing to let emotion guide her tone. "I didn't expect any of this." Theodore's eyes finally shifted to her. For a moment everything else fell away. The wedding plans, the polished life he'd built, the expectations of everyone who shaped him, the guarded, distant version of himself that had replaced the man she once knew. All that remained was a look he used to reserve only for her. A look of recognition and regret. His fiancée watched him closely. "Theodore," she said again, a bit firmer now. "Do you know her?" He exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. "Yes," he answered softly, but the word carried an entire history inside it. A history his fiancée wasn't prepared to recognize in his voice. Alexis held her shoulders steady, refusing to let the weight of the past drag her back into the girl she once was, the one who believed love alone was enough to bridge worlds built so differently. She wasn't that woman anymore. Motherhood had carved resilience into her bones. But this moment cracked through her guard. The twins didn't understand the tension filling the room. Caitlin pointed at the polished mirror panel beside Theodore. "Mommy, look," she whispered. "He has the same eyes as me." Alexis's breath faltered. Nathaniel reached toward Theodore again, this time with less hesitation, as if drawn by something he couldn't explain. Theodore's knees nearly buckled at the gesture. His fiancée stared at him, searching his expression for denial, for reassurance, for anything. But Theodore's face was stripped raw, honesty laid bare in shock. Alexis pulled the stroller back slightly, trying to soften the closeness before the moment spun out of control. "This is not the place," she murmured more to herself than to anyone else. But Caitlin, still watching Theodore, broke the fragile balance with a simple question, one filled with the kind of innocence that cuts deeper than accusations. "Mommy, why is that man staring at me?" The elevator air tightened. Theodore's face crumpled in the smallest, quietest way, just enough to show the crack forming in his carefully curated life. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. His fiancée's breath hitched audibly. "Theodore," she whispered, "why does she look like—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The truth was standing in front of her, breathing slowly, eyes wide, holding onto a stroller Alexis once built her entire life around. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the main floor, a bright sound that contrasted sharply with the heaviness inside the space. The doors glided open. No one moved. because stepping out meant stepping into consequences none of them were prepared for. Alexis finally guided the stroller toward the exit. Each step felt like wading through water, slow, deliberate, heavy, but necessary. She didn't look back, not because she didn't want to, but because she knew looking back would unravel the fragile strength she had fought to maintain for years. It was Theodore who stepped out next, his feet almost stumbling forward. His fiancée followed a beat later, her face pale with realization. The lobby swallowed them all into its bright, echoing space, but the moment in the elevator stayed pressed into their chests, an unanswered question hanging like a weight in the air. No one had spoken the truth yet, but everyone felt it. And in that stillness, in that breath right before the next turn, their lives had already changed. The lobby of Theodore's tower was too bright for the kind of moment unfolding inside it. Sunlight stretched across the polished floor, bouncing off glass walls like the building was determined to stay professional, even while lives were coming undone at its center. Alexis pushed the stroller forward, her steps steady but her pulse far from calm. She had no desire to perform this moment in public. No mother did, no woman did, but life rarely gave warnings before dropping a test in your path. Behind her, Theodore stepped out of the elevator as though gravity had changed on him. His fiancée followed close, not touching him this time, not guiding him by the arm as she often did. Instead, she stopped just a few feet away from him, staring at the twins with widening eyes. "Theodore," she asked again, voice thin with disbelief, "why do they look like you?" This time the question didn't fall into the air unnoticed. It sliced through the lobby. A few people passing slowed their stride, subtle but noticeable. Someone behind the reception desk lifted her head before pretending she wasn't listening. Alexis felt heat rise in her cheeks, not embarrassment, not guilt, but exhaustion. She didn't want to be the center of attention in a building that had never held space for her life. She straightened her shoulders. She didn't owe anyone here anything, not an explanation, not a performance. "I need to go," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. She began to move, pushing the stroller toward the far hallway that led to the offices. But before she could take more than 2 steps, she heard her name. Quiet, cracked, desperate. "Alexis," just one word, but enough to stop her. Her hand tightened around the stroller handle. Her breath caught in her throat, memories pulling at her ribs. She didn't turn around immediately. He didn't deserve immediate access, but the way he said her name, like a man drowning who suddenly saw land, forced her to face him. She turned halfway. Theodore stood there with his chest rising unevenly, eyes locked on the twins, every part of him stripped of the control he normally wore like a second suit. His fiancée stepped closer to him, emotion rising in her voice. "Theodore," she repeated, firmer this time, "you need to answer me. Why do those children look exactly like you?" Alexis inhaled slowly, fighting to keep her expression neutral. This wasn't the moment she wanted. This wasn't the moment she planned. But she wasn't running. She refused to give anyone here the impression she was hiding something, especially something that had never been her burden to conceal. She looked Theodore straight in the eyes, her voice steady. "You should handle your conversation." His fiancée turned toward Alexis sharply. "You knew him. You two were—" Her voice shook. Suspicion had become realization, and realization had become fear. Alexis didn't respond to her question. It wasn't her job to mend the cracks forming in someone else's relationship. Her only job was protecting her children from chaos. Caitlin tugged at her mother's jacket softly. "Mommy, can we go home now? I'm hungry." Nathaniel rubbed his eyes, tired from the long morning. Alexis nodded gently at them both. "We will, baby. Just a moment." Theodore stepped forward, not too close, but enough distance to show he wasn't trying to overtake her space. His voice trembled around the words he'd been holding in for years. "Alexis, please, don't walk away. Not yet." The plea hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't commanding like someone used to control. It was soft. It was honest. And it was a reminder of the man who once held her while whispering plans they never got to live. But she stayed still, not moving forward, not moving back, just holding her ground. Because she had learned the difference between emotional truth and emotional impulsiveness. She wasn't going to fall into old patterns simply because emotions were running high. The lobby seemed to shrink around them as Theodore's fiancée stepped directly in front of him. "If you know something," she said to him, voice trembling, "you need to tell me. Right now." Theodore finally tore his eyes away from the twins and met her gaze. The shift was slow, heavy, reluctant. His mouth opened, but no answer came. Not yet. His fiancée let out a humorless breath. You can't seriously be speechless right now, not after this. Her hand swept toward the stroller, toward the two children who were watching the adults with innocent eyes. Nathaniel blinked up at Theodore again, watchful, curious, a little confused. That look cracked something in Theodore's chest. For the first time, Alexis saw his shoulders sag under a weight he clearly wasn't prepared to carry. His control slipped. Completely. He pressed a palm against his forehead, then ran his fingers through his hair in a gesture Alexis hadn't seen in years, the gesture he used to do whenever the world overwhelmed him. His fiancée stared, confused by a version of him she had never seen. "Teddy," she began, but he cut her off without raising his voice. "Give me a second." It wasn't harsh. It wasn't dismissive. It was a man trying to breathe. Alexis saw his chest rise and fall as he tried to gather himself. This wasn't the powerful executive she saw on news segments, not the polished man at fundraisers, not the calm, collected partner to the woman beside him. This was Theodore stripped to the core. She had known he would react. Of course she had. No one could look into the eyes of two children who mirrored them so closely and pretend there was no connection. But she didn't expect this level of unraveling. Not in public, not in front of his fiancée, not in front of her. She softened her voice, just enough for him to hear, but not enough to comfort. "Theodore," she said, "the kids don't need all of this attention. Let's not do this out here." Her tone wasn't pleading. It was protective. Of the twins. Of herself. Even, in a strange way, of him. Because she knew this moment was bigger than all three of them. His fiancée took a shaky step back. "So this is real," she whispered to herself more than anyone else. Theodore didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it. Tears didn't fall, but something close to breaking shimmered across his face. And in that lobby, filled with echoes of steps and murmurs of strangers pretending not to look, the silence between them became the battlefield no one had chosen. Theodore looked at Alexis again, his voice nothing but quiet truth. "I need to talk to you, please." Alexis exhaled, steadying herself. "Then follow me," she replied, and with that she pushed the stroller forward, not running, not rushing, just moving with the dignity of someone who had carried far heavier things than this moment. Theodore followed. His fiancée stayed frozen where she stood, and the lobby watched a life split open. Alexis guided the stroller toward a quieter section of the lobby, away from the steady stream of executives and assistants bustling past. A soft chair sat near a frosted glass wall, one of those designated lounge corners usually reserved for guests waiting on appointments. Today, it became the crossroads none of them could escape. She stopped beside the seating area, adjusting the twins' jackets as they settled. Caitlin leaned her head on her mother's arm, curious eyes darting between the adults. Nathaniel swung his legs lightly, humming a tune he'd picked up from a cartoon. The normalcy of their behavior contrasted painfully with the chaos unfolding around them. Theodore reached the lounge a few steps behind Alexis. He didn't sit. He couldn't. His posture was caught between shock and apology, between a man who wanted answers and a man afraid of the answers waiting for him. His fiancée stayed a few feet away, close enough to hear everything, far enough to keep a barrier between herself and the truth forming in front of her. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together as if bracing for impact. Alexis took a slow breath, then turned toward Theodore. "What do you want to say?" she asked quietly. Her voice didn't tremble, not because she felt strong, but because she didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Not here, not today. Theodore's throat worked before he found words. "Alexis, I don't know where to start." She nodded once. "Then start with the truth." His fiancée stepped closer, her voice sharp with disbelief. "The truth? Theodore, are you seriously telling me there is a truth here?" He didn't look at her. He couldn't take his eyes off the twins. Alexis could feel tension building like a pressure valve, threatening to snap open if she didn't keep the moment steady. So she leaned slightly toward the twins and whispered, "Sweethearts, sit right here next to Mommy, okay? Just stay close." They nodded, content, unaware of how much their presence meant in this room. When she straightened again, Theodore's gaze met hers. A question lived inside it, one he hadn't dared ask until now. "Alexis," he said, the words trembling. "Are they?" She didn't let him finish. She didn't let the moment drag. "Yes," she said gently. "They're yours." The air shifted. Theodore inhaled sharply, as though the confirmation hit his lungs instead of his ears. His hand reached instinctively toward the nearest chair, gripping the back of it to stay upright. His fiancée froze. "What?" she whispered, voice cracking. "Theodore, this has to be a mistake. Tell me this is a mistake." But he didn't speak. His eyes were locked on the twins, tiny faces staring back at him with calm innocence. Alexis continued, voice steady. I tried to tell you. I called. I emailed. I reached out every way I could before they were even born. Theodore's eyes snapped to hers. I never got those messages. I know, she replied softly. Your assistant blocked me. Your family stepped in. They didn't want me anywhere near your world. The words cut him open. My family, he whispered. His voice shook with confusion and something darker, betrayal. Alexis nodded once, no dramatic pause, no hesitation. They made it clear I wasn't someone they wanted in your life, and I wasn't going to beg anyone to believe my children mattered. His fiancée pressed a hand to her mouth. You're telling me these kids are his and his family? She turned toward Theodore with wide, hurt eyes. Teddy, please tell me this isn't true. He didn't answer her right away. He couldn't. His gaze drifted back to the twins. Caitlin smiled at him shyly, just a tiny, uncertain smile. Nathaniel tilted his head, mimicking Theodore's earlier gesture without knowing he was doing it. The resemblance was undeniable. Pain flickered across Theodore's face, not anger, not frustration, but grief. Grief for years he'd lost, memories he never got to make, birthdays he never celebrated, nights he never tucked them in. His voice cracked. Alexis, why didn't you try again? She stared at him, something soft but exhausted unfolding in her expression. Theodore, I was pregnant, alone, working 2 jobs, trying to keep myself together long enough to bring 2 lives into the world. After your assistant blocked me and your family shut the door on me. How many more times was I supposed to break myself trying to be heard? I had to protect my peace. He closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down so heavily his shoulders dipped. His fiancée stepped closer to him, but her voice was no longer sharp, it was fragile. Theodore, you told me you ended things cleanly with her. You said you two went your separate ways. Theodore finally looked at her. His expression held guilt, sorrow, and the beginnings of understanding. I thought we did, he said quietly. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Her eyes filled with tears. And if you did know, what then? The question hung in the air. Theodore didn't answer, not because he didn't have one, but because he did. Alexis shifted her stance slightly, wanting this moment to move toward clarity, not chaos. The children didn't deserve shouting. They didn't deserve public heartbreak. She glanced at Theodore's fiancée with empathy that surprised even herself. No one here is trying to destroy your relationship, she said calmly. I didn't come here for drama. I came to handle paperwork and go home. This wasn't planned. Her honesty wasn't bitter. It was tired, not defeated, just worn from carrying the weight of truth alone for too long. Theodore spoke again, voice soft but filled with something breaking open inside him. Alexis, I missed everything. She met his gaze, measured, careful. You did, and I never meant to, he whispered. I know. His fiancée stepped back, a small distance forming between them physically and emotionally. She stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. You never stopped loving her, she whispered. His silence answered for him. Alexis looked away, heart squeezing in her chest. This wasn't the moment she wanted, but it was the moment life chose, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same now. For a moment, the entire lounge felt suspended in time, like the building itself recognized the weight of what had been spoken and refused to move until someone breathed again. Alexis stood still, one hand resting on the stroller handle, the other quietly steadying Caitlin as she leaned into her side. Nathaniel tapped his shoes together, humming softly to himself, blissfully unaware of how much he'd just changed the course of 3 lives. Theodore hadn't moved, not an inch. His eyes were glassy, fixed on the twins with a hunger to understand, a desperation to reclaim lost years, and a fear of what facing the truth would cost him. His fiancée. She looked at him as though the floor had shifted underneath her, as though she had been handed a version of Theodore she didn't recognize. She turned toward Alexis suddenly. How long? She asked. Not harsh, just shaken. How long have you kept this from him? Alexis held her gaze. I didn't keep anything. I reached out. He never got the message. But once you realized he didn't know, why didn't you try again? Her voice cracked. Why didn't you tell him? Why wait until now? Alexis let out a slow breath. Because I had 2 newborns, because I was overwhelmed, because I was hurt, and because every door connected to him was shut in my face. After that, I had to focus on surviving, not chasing. Her tone wasn't defensive. It was truth, plain, lived, undeniable. Theodore swallowed, guilt tightening every line of his face. He took a step closer to the stroller, moving slowly, almost carefully, like he wasn't sure he had the right to stand near them. Nathaniel noticed him and paused his humming. He lifted his head, studying the man again. Then, in a voice so soft and innocent it pierced the entire room, he asked, "Are you Daddy?" The world stopped. Caitlin's eyes shifted from her brother to Theodore. Alexis's breath caught painfully in her throat. His fiancée's hand flew to her chest. And Theodore, he broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, devastating way, the kind of break that happens inside a person when a truth they never expected lands directly on their heart. He crouched down slowly so he was eye level with the twins. It wasn't something he planned or thought through. It came from instinct, from recognition, from a truth he could no longer push down. His voice trembled as he spoke. I didn't know," he whispered to Nathaniel. "No one told me, but yes, I think I am." Nathaniel blinked once, processing the words the way only a child could, simply, honestly, without complication. Caitlin leaned forward slightly in her seat. "Mommy said you have kind eyes," she whispered. Alexis closed her eyes, a quiet ache pressing under her ribs. She had said that, once, months ago, half asleep, answering one of Caitlin's endless questions about why people look the way they do. Theodore's expression faltered as he looked over at Alexis. There was something raw in his face, gratitude, guilt, grief, a longing he didn't know how to name. His fiancée's voice broke the moment. "So it's true," her whisper trembled in the air. "You have children, with her." Theodore slowly rose to his feet. He didn't reach for her, didn't step toward her. He simply faced her fully, for the first time since the elevator doors opened. "I didn't know," he said again, his voice deep with regret. "I swear to you, I didn't know." "But you loved her," she fired back, not angrily, but like someone trying to steady their world. "You still love her. I can see it." Silence followed, the kind that answers a question without using a single word. Theodore didn't deny it. Alexis looked away, her chest tightening. She didn't want this woman to hurt. She didn't come here to destroy anything. But some truths couldn't be softened. Behind the reception desk, 2 employees pretended to work, but their eyes kept flicking toward the scene. A pair of interns near the hallway slowed down, whispering to each other. Alexis felt heat rise in her cheeks again, this time from frustration. She leaned down toward the twins and spoke gently. "Baby, Nathaniel, Caitlin, stay close to Mommy, okay? We'll leave soon." They nodded. She straightened and turned toward Theodore and his fiancée. "We shouldn't do this out here," she said firmly, but without sharpness. But the tension had already thickened in the room. Theodore's fiancée pointed toward the twins again, her hand shaking. "This changes everything," she said to him. "Everything." "I know," Theodore answered quietly. "No," she said, voice rising slightly. "You don't know. You're not thinking clearly. You're reacting. I'm seeing my children for the first time," he interrupted softly. "That's all I'm thinking about." The words weren't loud, but they hit with force. His fiancée stepped back as if physically pushed. Her face folded, not in anger, but in heartbreak. "You should have told me," she whispered. "You should have told me you still had feelings for her." Theodore closed his eyes. "I didn't realize I did," he admitted. "But seeing her," he exhaled shakily. "I can't pretend anything right now." That was the moment the room seemed to shift its balance. Not toward chaos, toward truth. Alexis stepped in, not aggressively, but to anchor the moment before it spiraled further. "We're not having this conversation here," she said again, firmer. "My kids don't need to hear grown-up problems." Nathaniel tugged lightly on Theodore's pant leg. "Can Daddy come with us now?" he asked. Theodore's jaw tightened with emotion he barely held together. His hand hovered near Nathaniel's shoulder, then slowly rested there, gentle, unsure, but present. His fiancée let out a quiet cry. The lobby echoed with it. People pretended not to look, but they did. And Alexis felt a pang of empathy for the woman. She wasn't the villain here. She'd simply stepped into a story that began years before she arrived. Nathaniel looked up at Theodore again, waiting for an answer. Theodore crouched once more to meet his eyes. "I want to," he said softly. "More than you know." Alexis swallowed hard. The fiancée turned away, covering her mouth as tears gathered. And in that fragile moment, where innocence and truth collided, the path ahead for all of them shifted into something none of them had been prepared to walk. The hallway leading to the executive lounge was quieter than the lobby, but quiet didn't mean peaceful. Quiet simply meant everyone could hear their own heartbeat again, and in this moment, None of their heartbeats were steady. Alexis pushed the stroller forward slowly, her steps careful but grounded. The twins kicked their legs softly, unaware of how heavy the air behind them had become. Nathaniel glanced over his shoulder once, watching Theodore follow them at a distance of 3 or 4 steps, close enough to be present, far enough to give Alexis room. Theodore's fiancée walked beside him, not touching him anymore. Her posture was stiff, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles showed pale through her skin. She walked like someone forcing themselves to stay composed for one last stretch. The lounge door whispered open when Alexis pushed it with her free hand. The room looked calm, soft chairs, warm lighting, a table set with water pitchers and glasses. A quiet corner meant for small meetings, phone calls, or tired employees needing 5 minutes of silence. Today, it became something else entirely. Alexis guided the stroller near the window, settling the twins where they could look outside, instead of hearing every word the adults exchanged. She kneeled to tuck Caitlin's little coat around her shoulders. Nathaniel pressed his face against the window glass, fascinated by the movement of cars below. She took a deep breath, then stood. Theodore remained near the entrance, his breathing uneven, his eyes still carrying the weight of a revelation that refused to soften. His fiancée stepped slightly ahead of him. Her voice trembled, not with rage, but with hurt that had been knocked loose without warning. "Alexis," she said, "I need to understand something." Alexis turned toward her calmly. "What do you want to know? How long were you and Theodore involved?" Her voice cracked in the center of the question. Alexis didn't want to rewind history, not because she was ashamed, but because dragging the past into the present felt like opening a wound she had already learned to live with. "Long enough," Alexis answered gently, "to believe we were building something real." Theodore closed his eyes briefly, as though the memory of it, their late-night hopes, the promises he made, pierced him. His fiancée swallowed. And his family, they knew. Alexis nodded slowly. They knew. And they made their opinion clear. Theodore frowned, confusion tightening his face. "What do you mean they made it clear?" Alexis didn't soften the truth. "They told me your life was moving forward without me. They said contacting you wasn't necessary. They implied I wasn't the right person to speak to you anymore." Theodore stared at her, not like he doubted her, not like he questioned her, but like he had never fully understood the power his family had wielded behind his back. "My father?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "I never spoke to him. Your mother's assistant was the one who called. She said she was speaking on behalf of the family." His fiancée's eyes widened. "They never told you that?" "No." Theodore's voice carried the unmistakable weight of betrayal. "They told me she stopped responding, that she moved on." Alexis lifted her chin. "I didn't move on. I went silent because I was pregnant and alone. I stopped reaching out because every path back to you ended with someone telling me I didn't belong." The room tightened with tension, not loud, but heavy, like gravity itself thickened around them. His fiancée pressed her fingertips to her brow. "So your family cut communication without telling you?" "Yes," Theodore answered quietly, still staring at Alexis. "And I didn't question it because I trusted them." Alexis crossed her arms gently, not defensive, but protective of her own heart. "You weren't supposed to chase me. You had a world that didn't include someone like me. They wanted to keep it that way." Theodore winced, the truth landing with painful precision. His fiancée shook her head slowly. "Teddy, they lied to you." Her voice wasn't angry, just wounded and uncertain, as if realizing she had stepped into a life shadowed by secrets that weren't hers. The twins giggled softly behind them, as Nathaniel pointed at a bird landing on a rooftop across the street. Their small laughter felt out of place in the thick emotional air, but also grounding, a reminder that life doesn't stop for adult heartbreak. Theodore turned toward the window, watching them, his face softening in a way Alexis hadn't seen in years. "I missed everything," he murmured, voice barely audible. Caitlin heard him. She twisted around on her seat, her eyes bright and curious. "Missed what?" she asked. Theodore didn't answer aloud. He didn't need to. Alexis answered for him, her tone warm and steady. "He means he missed your first steps and your first words, baby." Caitlin nodded with the solemn wisdom of a child. "It's okay. You can see us now." Her simplicity almost broke him. Alexis saw his chest rise sharply, his breath catching again. The fiancée stepped backward, her shoulders curling inward slightly as if realizing the situation was bigger than anything she had prepared for. "It wasn't just that you didn't know," she whispered to Theodore. "It's that, the minute you saw them, everything in you changed." Theodore didn't deny it. He couldn't. He stepped closer to Alexis, not invading her space, but close enough that the truth between them had no room to hide. I didn't know what I was missing, he admitted, voice raw. But now that I do, I can't pretend I didn't see it. His fiancée turned toward the door, grasping the handle but not pulling it open yet. So, where does that leave me? Her voice was quiet, trembling, because I'm standing in a room full of truths that weren't supposed to belong to me. The room fell still. Alexis didn't answer for Theodore. She wouldn't. This moment belonged to him. His breath shook. I don't know, he said truthfully. I'm trying to understand what all of this means. His fiancée wiped at her cheek silently. For a moment she looked small, not weak, just overwhelmed. She had walked into her day planning a wedding. She was now walking through a revelation that changed every detail of it. And Theodore, he wasn't the same man who stepped into the elevator that morning. He was something new, something unraveling, something awakening, something no longer hiding. And Alexis saw it all. The room felt smaller now, not physically, but emotionally. Like every breath, every glance, every shift in the air was charged with a meaning none of them wanted to face too quickly. The twins sat by the window, swinging their feet and whispering to each other as they watched cars move along the street far below. Their quiet chatter filled the space with a kind of innocence that felt out of reach for the adults standing behind them. Theodore was still standing, though his body had softened. His shoulders weren't rigid anymore. His jaw wasn't clenched. His expression, normally composed, confident, carried a look of surrender. The kind of surrender that happens when a truth finally touches a man's ribcage and refuses to leave. His fiancée stayed near the side of the room, hands clasped in front of her, watching all of it unfold. She wasn't angry, not yet. She was something more complicated, shaken, afraid, unsure if she belonged in the scene unfolding in front of her. But it was the twins who finally spoke again, pulling every adult back into the moment. Caitlin pressed her hand against the window, her eyes bright. Mommy, look, that car looks like the one Auntie drives. Alexis smiled softly. I see it, baby. Nathaniel turned his head toward the adults. Are we staying here long? His voice was calm, curious. Before Alexis could answer, Theodore walked toward them, not abruptly, not boldly, but with a softness that surprised even him. He crouched beside them, careful not to overwhelm, careful not to insert himself too quickly. Nathaniel blinked at him. Caitlin tilted her head. Theodore swallowed, then spoke gently. I'd like to get to know you both, if that's okay. Nathaniel studied him for a moment, then pointed at Theodore's tie. Do you wear that every day? A small laugh escaped Theodore, quiet, genuine, the first real moment of lightness since the elevator. Most days, he admitted. Why? Nathaniel asked. Because it's part of my job. Caitlin reached out and touched the edge of the tie. It's smooth, she said. Theodore's breath caught. Such a small gesture, such a simple observation, but it felt like a doorway opening. He gently placed his hand on the floor beside him, not touching the twins yet, but grounding himself near them. You two. He paused, steadying his voice. You're amazing. Alexis watched from behind him, arms crossed, emotions carefully held in place. She had always known this moment would come, even if she never pictured it like this, under bright office building lights, with strangers pretending not to stare through half-cracked doors. But she also knew something else. She couldn't let the warmth of the moment fool her. Theodore's presence today didn't erase years of silence. It didn't erase late nights spent crying quietly so she wouldn't wake the twins. It didn't erase the loneliness she had swallowed while raising two children who asked questions she didn't always know how to answer. She needed boundaries. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Theodore's fiancée stepped forward just one step, arms folding tightly. So that's it? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. You see them, and everything changes? Theodore rose slowly to his feet. He turned toward her with a heavy breath. No, not everything, but enough. Her eyes glistened. So you did love her, she said, voice trembling. And you never stopped. Silence. A silence that confirmed everything she feared. Theodore didn't lie. He didn't deflect. He didn't run. He simply nodded, a soft acknowledgement that felt like the final crack in the picture she'd built of their future. I did, he said, and part of me never stopped. Alexis inhaled sharply, a subtle sound, but filled with emotion she didn't want spilling into the room. No, she said gently, don't put this on me. Not like this. Theodore turned toward her. Alexis, you don't get to say things like that because you feel overwhelmed, she said, her voice strong but calm. Not today. Her words were firm, but not cruel. She wasn't punishing him, she was protecting herself, protecting the part of her heart that remembered loving him so deeply it shifted the shape of her life. His fiancée wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "You should have told me," she whispered to him. "You should have told me you still had feelings for someone else before we started planning a wedding." "I didn't realize it," he said quietly. "I didn't let myself realize it." She let out a broken breath. Even worse. Alexis stepped closer to the twins as they whispered to each other. She gently straightened Nathaniel's jacket, brushing imaginary dust from his shoulder. She didn't interrupt the adults' conversation. She didn't insert herself. She was here for her children, nothing else. The twins giggled again, this time at something only they understood. Their joy rippled through the room, softening the edges of the tension but not erasing it. Theodore crouched again to their level, a different expression on his face now, one that held awe, regret, longing, and a strange tenderness he couldn't contain. "I want to be part of your life," he said softly. Caitlin nodded. "Mommy said people can learn," she replied matter-of-factly. Alexis froze. She had said that, just a few nights ago, during a bedtime talk about second chances at school. Theodore's face broke open with emotion. Her fiancé's face, meanwhile, sank. "So this is happening," she whispered. "You're choosing this." Theodore looked at her, regret in every line of his expression. "I'm not choosing," he said. "I'm telling you what I can't ignore." His fiancée looked away, her breath uneven. Alexis felt something tighten inside her chest, a mix of fear, old love, and a truth she didn't want to admit. Part of her still cared. Part of her always would. But care wasn't enough. Not anymore. She stepped forward, grounding the moment. "Theodore, slow down," she said firmly. "Think. Process. Don't make promises you can't keep." He looked at her with an honesty that felt unguarded. "I'm not promising anything," he said. "I'm admitting something." She inhaled, steadying herself. "What's that?" He lifted his eyes, raw and sincere. "That I never stopped loving you." The room didn't explode. It didn't shake. It simply exhaled the truth they'd both been avoiding. Alexis looked away, not dramatically, not angrily, but because looking at him too long felt dangerous. For the first time in years, her heart remembered exactly how he made her feel. The words hung in the air long after they left Theodore's mouth. "I never stopped loving you." Alexis felt them hit her chest like a slow, heavy pulse, one she wasn't ready for, one she didn't trust, one she knew had the power to break her twice if she wasn't careful. The twins were still whispering softly beside the window, their bodies relaxed, their laughter flickering like small bursts of light in the dim weight of the moment. Their innocence was the only part of the room untouched by tension. Theodore's fiancée, however, finally let her pain show. It was subtle at first, a tight swallow, a trembling breath, but then her composure cracked. "You said you loved me," she whispered, her voice almost too soft to hear. "You said you were ready for a life with me." Theodore didn't look away from Alexis when he answered. "I thought I was," he admitted. "I convinced myself I was." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't wipe them. She didn't move closer, didn't step away. She just stood there, silently absorbing the consequences of a truth she didn't cause. Alexis placed a hand on the stroller as if grounding herself, her voice steady. "Theodore, don't." She didn't raise it. She didn't fight. She simply spoke with a clarity earned through years of surviving heartbreak. "Don't say things now because emotions are running high. Don't confuse guilt or shock with love." His eyes dropped, only for a second. But when he lifted them, they were certain. "This isn't confusion," he said. "This is honesty." Alexis shook her head gently. "You're feeling everything at once. That's not the same as knowing what you want." His fiancée let out a quiet breath, her voice unsteady. "So, you're choosing her. Not angry. Just broken." Theodore finally turned toward her, his expression pained. "I'm not choosing anyone right now," he replied. "I'm facing the truth I avoided for years." She stared at him like she was seeing a stranger, wearing the man she planned to marry. "But you didn't avoid it alone," she said quietly. "You avoided it with me. You built a life with me. You let me believe you were happy." Theodore didn't deny it. He simply looked down, guilt tightening his features, but not pulling his gaze away from the reality he finally had to face. "And what about us?" she asked. "What about the life we were planning?" He didn't answer. Silence filled the room, thick, waiting, suffocating. It was Caitlin who broke it. She turned from the window, her small voice echoing through the tension. "Mommy, can he come with us today?" Alexis froze. Nathaniel looked at her too, his expression hopeful. "Yeah," he added with a little nod. "Can Daddy come?" "Daddy." The word hung in the air like a match over gasoline. Theodore inhaled sharply, his chest rising in a tremble he tried to control. His knees buckled just slightly before he steadied himself. His fiancée gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They already see you that way." Alexis pressed her lips together, her heart throbbing painfully. She crouched down next to the twins, brushing her hand over their hair, forcing herself to breathe slowly. "Sweethearts," Alexis began, her voice gentle, "this is a big day. A lot is happening. We need to take things slowly." Caitlin frowned. "But he likes us." Nathaniel nodded. "And we like him." Theodore's voice cracked as he knelt beside them. "I do like you," he said softly. "More than you know." His fiancée let out a broken sound, half sigh, half sob, as she leaned against the corner wall, trying to hold herself together. Nathaniel reached out to touch Theodore's sleeve. "Can you come with us?" he asked again. The room tightened. Alexis swallowed. "Theodore has things he needs to handle today," she said slowly. "Grown-up things, complicated things. But why?" Caitlin asked, her eyebrows pinched. "He's right here." Theodore looked at Alexis, eyes pleading for clarity. "Can I?" he asked softly. "Just for a little while?" Alexis turned toward him fully, searching his expression for the truth beneath the emotion. "You're making big choices in the middle of chaos," she warned quietly. "This isn't simple." "I know," he replied. "But I want to be with them, and with you." His fiancée straightened sharply, her composure snapping like thin glass. "No," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, just final. "You don't get to play two lives at once, Theodore." He looked at her, guilt etched into every part of his face. "I'm not playing anything." She shook her head. "You are." Her voice cracked. "Because if you walk out of here with them," she paused, chest rising and falling quickly, "then you're choosing them and her, not me." Theodore didn't respond immediately. His heart was pounding, not from excitement or panic, but from realization. A realization that had been building since the elevator doors opened, and two small sets of gray eyes looked up at him like they'd known him forever. Alexis took a step back, trying to separate herself from the growing storm. "Don't make decisions in front of the kids," she said firmly. But the twins were already watching, already listening, already waiting. Theodore's fiancée stepped forward, her voice trembling. "So choose now." The words hit the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Everything went still. Theodore's breath shuddered. His expression broke in a way he hadn't allowed in years. "This isn't fair," he whispered. "No," she replied. "It's real." He looked at Alexis, longer than he meant to. Long enough for the truth to show. Long enough for his fiancée to see everything she feared. Then he looked down at the twins, their faces open, trusting, patient. Something shifted in his chest. Not a collapse, but an alignment. "I need to be with them," he said finally. His fiancée closed her eyes, the pain on her face unmistakable. "And her?" she whispered. Theodore didn't answer, because the answer was written in the way he looked at Alexis, not with longing, not with confusion, but with a deep, quiet connection that had never truly died. Alexis shook her head slowly. "Theodore, this isn't the moment to decide anything about us." "I know," he replied softly, "but it's the moment I decide what kind of man I'm going to be from now on." The fiancée pressed her hand against her chest as if steadying her heart. "So that's it," she said. "You're choosing them?" He nodded, slow and heavy. "Yes." The room exhaled the truth, and nothing could take it back. The lounge felt too quiet for the magnitude of what had just happened. Not silent, quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after a storm breaks open, but before anyone has found the strength to breathe again. The twins were still by the window, watching the world outside with small smiles and soft chatter, unaware that their lives, and the lives of everyone in the room, had just shifted in a way none of them could undo. Theodore stood in the middle of the room as if rooted to the floor. His breath came slowly, unevenly, his chest rising in a way that revealed more emotion than he ever allowed in public. His gaze swept between the twins and Alexis, and then stopped on his fiancée, who stood near the wall, her body tightened with grief she could no longer hide. She wiped her cheek carefully, not wanting to fall apart, but unable to cover the way her heart cracked open. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're choosing them." Her voice didn't carry anger. It carried heartbreak, the kind that isn't loud, the kind that sinks instead of shatters. Theodore took a step toward her, his tone soft. "It's not a choice between you and them. It's not that simple." She shook her head slowly. "It is. It always has been. Her eyes drifted to the twins, small, innocent, carrying the eyes she had once admired in the man standing in front of her. They deserve you, she continued quietly. And her voice trembled. She clearly still lives in your heart. Alexis looked down at her hands, jaw tightening for a moment. She wanted to correct her. She wanted to say that she wasn't the reason for this breakup, but she couldn't soften what was already true. Theodore rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he hadn't done since he was a younger man overwhelmed by life. I didn't plan this, he said gently, but I can't walk away from them now, not again. His fiancée exhaled shakily. So, you're ending us? Theodore didn't answer immediately. He looked down, swallowing hard before lifting his gaze. You're right, he said. You deserve someone whose heart is fully present, someone who isn't divided, someone who can give you everything you planned for. Her hand rose to her mouth again as she breathed in sharply. And that's not you anymore, she whispered. Not today, he answered honestly. And I won't lie to you by pretending otherwise. Alexis closed her eyes for a brief second. Hearing the end of someone else's love story while standing in the middle of her own broken one felt heavy, like she was watching consequences she never asked for, yet somehow had to carry part of. The fiancé took a small step toward the door, pausing before she spoke again. When we met, she said softly, I thought you were the safest man I had ever known, predictable, stable, ready to build something. She looked at Alexis, not with blame, but with a painful clarity. I never realized part of him was still living in a world he never healed from. Alexis swallowed but said nothing. The fiancé turned back to Theodore, her eyes rimmed with tears. I loved who I thought you were, she said. Not who you're becoming right now, not this version of you. She reached for her engagement ring, not dramatically, not with anger. She pulled it off slowly, almost gently, as though she were handling something fragile. She placed it in Theodore's hand. He stared down at it, stunned. I hope you become the man your children deserve, she whispered. And I hope, whatever you feel for her, I hope you understand it fully before you break anyone else. She didn't wait for him to respond. She opened the door quietly, walked through, and closed it behind her. No slamming, no shouting, just an ending wrapped in grace, pain, and acceptance. The room felt different the moment she was gone. Not lighter, not heavier, just real. Theodore stood frozen with the ring in his hand, staring at it as though it were a symbol of a life he thought was solid, but had revealed its cracks the moment truth entered the room. Alexis approached him slowly, not close enough to crowd him, but close enough to steady the space. Theodore, she said softly. He blinked, his eyes glazed, not with tears, but with something deeper. Shock, loss, recognition. I didn't want that to happen, he whispered. Alexis answered with honesty, not comfort. It was going to happen no matter what. She saw what you feel. He opened his mouth to argue, but she held up a hand gently, not to silence him, but to guide him. You can't pretend this moment didn't change everything. You can't pretend you're the same man she walked into the building with this morning. Theodore looked down, hands trembling slightly. The ring glinted softly in his palm. I thought I wanted the life I built, he murmured, but somewhere inside, I've been running from something unfinished. Alexis inhaled, steadying herself. You're overwhelmed, she reminded him. You just ended a major part of your life. Don't make this about me. But it is about you, he said, voice cracking. This all started with you. She hardened her tone slightly, protecting the fragile balance. No, it started with truth. The truth that these children exist. The truth that life didn't pause when we broke up. The truth you're confronting right now. He pressed his hands to his thighs, breathing deeply. I don't regret choosing them, he whispered. I can't regret that. You shouldn't, she said. They're your children. Their children watched from the window, still chatting quietly, unaware of the emotional earthquake behind them. Alexis glanced toward them. Everything has changed, she said quietly, but nothing is settled. Don't confuse today's emotions with tomorrow's decisions. Theodore stepped closer, carefully, slowly, mindful of boundaries. Alexis, he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it in years. I meant what I said. She shook her head gently. You meant it in a moment of shock. I meant it in a moment of clarity, he corrected. Their eyes held for a long second. Not romantic, not desperate, but painfully honest. And behind them, two small voices giggled again, reminding them both of why the truth finally mattered. The door clicked softly behind Theodore's fiancée, but the quiet was louder than any argument could have been. It settled over the room thickly, gently, like dust on a surface untouched for years. Alexis felt it settle in her chest, too. An ache she didn't want, didn't ask for, and didn't know how to push away. The twins kept whispering beside the window, their small heads close together as they traced shapes on the glass. Their world hadn't shifted. They were still just two children looking at tall buildings and sunlight bouncing off cars. But for the adults, everything had changed. Theodore stood near the center of the room, staring down at the engagement ring in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly, the kind of trembling that happens when adrenaline mixes with loss and a truth too big to understand all at once. Alexis watched him carefully, not crossing the invisible line between their histories. She didn't move closer. She didn't reach out. She didn't offer comfort she wasn't sure he was ready for. Instead, she let him speak first. She didn't deserve that, Theodore whispered. His voice wasn't cracking anymore. It wasn't shaky. It was simply hollow, the voice of someone seeing the consequences of choices he didn't know he'd made. Alexis nodded softly. No. She didn't. He inhaled sharply, rubbing his thumb across the ring once before setting it down on a nearby table. The metal made a faint tapping sound against the surface, light but final. I didn't mean to hurt her, he said. Alexis kept her voice even. Intent doesn't erase the hurt. He nodded slowly, accepting the truth. I know. The silence stretched, not suffocating but heavy, as though both of them were trying to figure out how to breathe in a new version of their lives. The twins shifted again, and Caitlin tugged at Alexis's sleeve. Mommy, she whispered. Is she okay? Alexis knelt beside her daughter, brushing a curl away from her forehead. She's sad right now, baby. Because you grown-ups were talking loud? Nathaniel asked from the window. Alexis gave a soft smile. It's not about being loud. Sometimes adults just feel too many things at once. Nathaniel nodded seriously, as if absorbing a new life lesson. Like when I want a snack but I'm tired, and I want to play, but I also want mommy. Alexis laughed gently. Yes, baby. Exactly like that. Theodore listened from behind her. His shoulders softened just a little. Their children he had never known, already had a way of grounding tension simply by being present. He stepped closer, but stayed a respectful distance. When Alexis stood again, Theodore locked eyes with her. You look exhausted, he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. I'm a mother of twins, working 2 jobs, navigating life alone. Exhaustion is part of my personality now. He blinked, surprise, guilt, and admiration crossing his face all at once. I'm sorry, he murmured. For all the nights you were alone. For all the things I missed. Don't apologize for things you didn't know, she replied. But I should have known, he said. I should have asked more questions back then. I should have fought harder. I should have. Theodore, she cut in gently. You can't fix the past by drowning in regret. The twins don't need a man stuck in what didn't happen. They need the man standing here now. He swallowed hard, those words hitting deeper than he expected. Alexis pressed on, her voice steady but not unkind. And right now, you're a man who just ended an engagement. A man who just found out he has 2 children. A man whose entire life shifted in one morning. He didn't disagree. She took a breath. Let yourself feel the shock before you try to rebuild anything. He nodded, but his eyes drifted once more to the twins, longing and guilt mixing in a way Alexis couldn't ignore. Nathaniel turned toward him. Are you sad? He asked. Theodore crouched down again, trying to gather words a child could understand. A little, he admitted. But seeing you both makes it feel better. Caitlin reached out and touched his cheek, the simple, instinctive affection of a child who felt connection before understanding. You don't have to be sad, she said softly. We're nice. Theodore let out a small, broken laugh, the kind that comes from a place deeper than humor. Alexis felt her heart flip slightly at the sight. Not because of romance, because she'd raised her children to be gentle, even in uncertainty. Theodore looked back at Alexis. How did you do it? He asked quietly. How did you raise them alone all this time? Her expression shifted, pride mixed with weariness. I didn't have a choice, she said. When you're a mother, you learned one thing fast. No one is coming to save you. You just get up every day and do the impossible because tiny people count on you. His eyes softened with respect. Real, deep respect. I should have been here. You couldn't be, she reminded him. You didn't know. He nodded slowly. But now that I do, I want to make up for every day I missed. Alexis held up a hand, firm, clear. No, you can't make up for it. You can only start from here. He accepted the boundary, his breath steadying. Behind them, the door to the lounge opened slightly, a custodian poking his head in to check if the room was still occupied. When he saw the tension in the air, he nodded politely and closed the door again. Seconds later, Caitlin tapped Theodore's knee. "Do you know our favorite snacks?" she asked. He blinked. "No," he admitted. Nathaniel grinned proudly. "Then how can you be daddy if you don't know?" Theodore let out a breathless laugh, quiet, emotional, and utterly undone. Alexis turned away, pretending to fix the stroller buckle so she could hide the way her heart squeezed. The twins weren't trying to hurt him. They were simply being themselves, open, genuine, unfiltered. And Theodore, he was unraveling in the best possible way. He pressed a hand to the carpet, grounding himself. "I want to learn everything," he said softly. "I want to know your favorite snacks, your favorite shows, your favorite stories. I want to know what makes you laugh and what scares you. I want to know everything I've missed." Alexis's throat tightened at his sincerity. "And I know," he continued, turning toward her, "that I can't demand trust. Not from them, not from you." He stood slowly, meeting her gaze fully. "So I'll earn it," he said, "day by day. Whatever it takes." Alexis didn't look away. For the first time since he left her years ago, she believed him. Theodore had been around children before. Charity dinners, holiday events, family gatherings with distant cousins. Kids who shook his hand shyly because their parents nudged them forward. Kids who smiled politely, then wandered off. But this, standing a few feet from two small people who carried his eyes, his curiosity, his quiet thoughtfulness, this felt different in a way he didn't have the vocabulary for. Nathaniel tugged lightly at his sleeve again. "Do you want to sit with us?" he asked, as if it were the most normal question in the world. Theodore's breath caught. No child had ever asked him that. Not as a man, not as a father. He lowered himself slowly onto the carpet next to the twins, his knees bending with the stiffness of someone not used to sitting on the floor in designer trousers. But he didn't care. Not in that moment. Caitlin scooted closer, her curls bouncing as she shifted. "You can sit here," she said, patting the spot beside her. "Mommy sits here when we draw." Theodore sat, not beside them the way a polite adult sits next to unfamiliar children. He sat like someone joining something he didn't realize he'd been missing his entire life. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees as he watched them. Their small hands, their patterned socks, the way their legs swung in the air without touching the ground, their unfiltered expressions, the simplicity of them dismantled him. Caitlin reached into a small pocket on the stroller and pulled out a crumpled drawing. Two stick figures stood under a crooked sun, holding hands with two smaller ones. "This is me," she said proudly, pointing at the taller stick figure on the left. "And this is Mommy." Then she tapped the other tall figure. "And this is a friend." Theodore's breath hitched. A friend, a placeholder, a gap in their world. Nathaniel chimed in softly. "Mommy said maybe one day we'd meet someone who looks like us." Alexis closed her eyes at that, her hands gripping the stroller handle tightly. She never said it expecting this moment to arrive. She said it because children asked questions she wasn't always ready to answer, and she wanted to give them hope, not emptiness. Theodore's throat tightened painfully. I'm glad I'm here," he whispered. Caitlin looked up at him, her gray eyes, his gray eyes, reflecting a kind of innocent acceptance that felt overwhelming. "We're glad too," she said simply. No theatrics, no hesitation, just truth, in a small voice. Alexis watched the interaction from a careful distance, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough to give space to something delicate unfolding. Her heart felt tight, stretched between joy and fear. Joy that the twins finally had the connection she couldn't give them alone. Fear that Theodore might make promises and disappear again, intentionally or not, because love wasn't the problem. Life was, and life had already shown her it didn't always care about intentions. Nathaniel tapped Theodore's hand. "Do you know our names?" It was such a simple question, one that shattered Theodore again in the softest way possible. "Yes," he said quietly. "Caitlin and Nathaniel." Caitlin smiled. "You said it right." Alexis felt her lips part involuntarily. Theodore had always been attentive to detail. He remembered names, dates, small quirks. He had remembered hers even when they no longer spoke. Some part of her had always known he would remember his children too, if he ever knew they existed. Nathaniel leaned forward. "What's your favorite color?" Theodore blinked. "My favorite color?" Both children nodded eagerly. He cleared his throat, still adjusting to being asked mundane questions that felt monumental. "I guess blue," Caitlin gasped dramatically, clutching her chest. "That's my favorite color." Nathaniel raised a hand triumphantly. Mine too. Theodore laughed, not the polished laugh he used in meetings, but a soft, unguarded one. The kind Alexis remembered from nights when they were younger and the world felt small enough to hold. He rested a hand gently on the carpet. So we match, he said. Caitlin grinned. Maybe that means we're family. The words hit Alexis like a gentle but firm push. She stepped closer quickly. Okay, she said softly. Let's remember this is a big day, and we're all just getting used to things. The twins nodded, unconcerned, but Theodore looked at Alexis with something deeper, something she didn't want him to say out loud. Not yet. Not when his engagement had ended minutes ago. Not when her trust was still an injured animal she protected fiercely. He turned fully toward her, his voice steady. I want to do this right, he said. I want to learn them slowly, the way a father should. I don't want to rush in and confuse them. Alexis held his gaze. And? She asked carefully. And? He exhaled, grounding himself. I want to earn your trust too, not ask for it, not take it, earn it. Her jaw tightened. Not because she didn't want to believe him, but because she did. And believing him scared her. Theodore, she said slowly, you just ended a major relationship. Today, right now. You're standing in the middle of heartbreak, shock, guilt, and a truth you weren't prepared for. I can't trust anything you say today. Not yet. He nodded without argument. He didn't defend himself. Didn't push. I understand, he said quietly. And I'm not asking you to. She crossed her arms gently. So, what are you asking? For time, he said. To show you who I am now. Not the man I was then. Alexis let those words settle. Time, not a confession, not a plea, not a promise he couldn't keep. Time. It was the first request he'd made that didn't feel dangerous. Nathaniel crawled into Theodore's lap without warning, settling in comfortably. Caitlin rested her head on Theodore's arm. Alexis's breath caught. This wasn't dramatized affection. This wasn't forced. This was instinct. Blood recognizing blood. Hearts filling empty spaces. Theodore swallowed a surge of emotion, placing a careful hand on Nathaniel's back. I'll earn this, he whispered. Both of you. All of you. I'll earn it. Alexis didn't smile. Not yet. But she didn't look away either. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope, quietly, cautiously, like someone holding a fragile glass they weren't sure belonged to them. Theodore didn't rush to stand after the twins wrapped themselves around him at the end of the last moment. He stayed on the carpeted floor with them for an extra breath he desperately needed. He wasn't sure he'd ever forget the way their small bodies leaned into him, trusting him without knowing anything about his flaws, mistakes, or past choices. But eventually, reality returned. Alexis cleared her throat gently, signaling it was time to gather their things. She didn't pull away sharply. She didn't retreat into cold formality. She simply shifted back into mother mode, the version of herself that ran on routine and responsibility because her life required it. Come on, babies, she said softly. We should go. Her voice wasn't detached, but it carried a defensive steadiness, the kind parents use when they're trying to keep emotions from spilling out in front of their kids. The twins obeyed, not with reluctance, but with a familiarity that showed how deeply they trusted her boundaries. Caitlin gathered her small backpack with both hands. Nathaniel tugged at the zipper to make sure it was closed. Theodore watched Alexis help them adjust their jackets. She didn't rush, but she didn't allow herself to linger either. Everything she did was measured, intentional. He took a small breath. Alexis, before we go downstairs, can we talk? She hesitated, glancing at the twins. About what? About all the things we didn't say earlier. She nodded once. Okay. But only while we walk. I don't want to stay in this building longer than necessary. There was honesty in that, not anger, just fatigue. They left the lounge together, the door closing quietly behind them. The hallway was still, the kind of quiet corporate space where even footsteps sounded polite. Theodore walked beside her, matching her pace, refusing to step ahead or lag behind. Once the elevator dinged for their floor, she finally spoke. You need to understand something, Theodore. Her tone wasn't sharp or dramatic. It was steady, honest. I've spent 3 years making peace with raising the twins alone. I built my life around protecting them from disappointment. I won't let anything threaten that stability. He nodded immediately. I respect that. I respect you. I'm serious, she continued. I can't afford for you to be here 1 week and gone the next. I can't let them get attached only for you to disappear. I won't disappear. She didn't smile. She didn't argue. She simply looked at him, long enough for him to understand that words meant nothing without proof. The elevator arrived. They stepped inside. The last time they were in this elevator together, the world cracked open. This time, they entered quietly, standing beside each other in a fragile peace. "Alexis," he said softly, "I want to be in their lives, fully, consistently, not as someone who drops in, someone who shows up, always." "And what does that mean?" she asked. "It means," he said, "that I want a schedule. I want involvement. I want to know their routines. I want to meet their teachers, go to their doctor's appointments, learn what foods they like and what shows they watch. I want structure, not chaos." Alexis blinked, surprised by his clarity. "You've had 20 minutes with them," she reminded him. "And it was enough to change everything." The elevator descended, humming under their feet. "I know I can't make up for missing the early years," he added. "I know I can't fix that pain. But I can give them a father now. A consistent, predictable, safe father." Alexis crossed her arms gently, not defensively, but thoughtfully. "You say that," she murmured, "but you still come from a world where people discourage emotional honesty, where things get brushed aside, where appearances matter more than real connection. That world," Theodore said quietly, "is exactly what I'm trying to break away from." She paused, absorbing that. He continued, "I was raised to keep my voice steady no matter what, to never show weakness, to avoid conflict. But that made me lose the most important thing in my life. 3 people, actually." The doors opened at the lobby. People passed them quickly, wrapped in busy morning routines, unaware of how much was shifting for the small family walking through the marble hall. When they reached the exit, Alexis turned to face him directly. "Here's what scares me, Theodore." He didn't flinch. "I'm scared you'll try for a month, maybe 2. Then the pressure from your world will get to you again. Your family will have opinions, your social circle will whisper, your business partners will judge, and you'll go quiet." "I won't," he said immediately. "You did before." He breathed in, slow and steady. "You're right," he said. "I did. And it's my biggest regret." She softened, not forgiving, but understanding. "I don't want to fight with you," she said. "I want to co-parent. But that means consistency, respect, communication, and patience." He nodded. "I can give you all of that. And space," she added. He blinked. "Space?" "Yes. Space to adjust, space to figure out how to be a father, space for me to trust that you're not going to break again when things get difficult." "I can do that," he said quietly. Her eyes softened, but only slightly. Nathaniel tugged her coat. "Mommy, look," he whispered, pointing outside. "A big bus." She smiled gently at him. "Yes, baby. We'll see it in a moment." Then she turned back to Theodore. "This isn't going to be easy," she said. "There will be decisions we don't agree on. There will be moments where our backgrounds clash. We come from different worlds, different experiences. Xio-parenting will mean navigating all of that." "I'm not afraid of that," he said. "You should be," she answered, but without bitterness. "Because real life is messy, Theodore, and you haven't lived messy in a long time." She was right, and he accepted it, but he didn't look away. He didn't retreat. He didn't shut down. "It's worth it," he said. "They're worth it. And you're worth it too." Alexis inhaled slowly. This steady, intentional vulnerability was new, and new things were dangerous. But sometimes they were necessary too. She finally nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll start small." Theodore's expression shifted, not to relief, but to gratitude. "What does small mean?" he asked carefully. "It means showing up when you say you will," she said. "It means helping where you can, not taking over. It means learning the rhythm of our life instead of trying to rewrite it." "That sounds fair," he whispered. "And Theodore?" she added gently. "Yes? Don't try to impress me. Impress them." He looked toward the twins, who were now admiring passing cars through the glass doors. A smile touched his lips. "I can do that," he said. And for the first time that day, Alexis believed him. Outside the building, the late morning sun warmed the concrete just enough to make the air feel alive. People moved around them with purpose, commuters rushing, food vendors shouting brief greetings, a few office workers taking early lunch breaks. It was the type of American city rhythm Alexis knew well, constant, slightly chaotic, and rarely forgiving. She guided the twins toward the sidewalk, glancing back to see Theodore keeping a steady distance, close enough to help, far enough not to intrude. He wasn't hovering. He was learning. That was new. Nathaniel held onto Alexis's hand, swinging it slightly as he walked. Caitlin skipped beside her, humming something she made up seconds earlier. But a few steps later, the hum stopped. Caitlin's foot caught on the edge of an uneven sidewalk tile, and she stumbled forward. Alexis reacted instantly, catching her by the elbow, but the movement startled the child enough that her backpack slipped off her shoulder and tumbled onto the ground. Before Alexis could bend to grab it, another hand got there first. Theodore. He picked up the backpack gently, brushing off the dirt with his thumb, and examined the zipper where it had snagged slightly during the fall. "Is this stuck?" he asked softly. Caitlin looked at him, cheeks pink with embarrassment. "It's always stuck." He crouched, eye level with her. "Let me see if I can fix it." Alexis watched closely. She didn't intervene. She didn't guide him. She let the moment breathe. Theodore adjusted the zipper track, tugged it lightly, and smoothed the edges. Within seconds, it slid neatly from end to end. Caitlin's face brightened. "You fixed it." He smiled. Sometimes things look broken, but they just need a gentle hand. The metaphor wasn't lost on Alexis. She shifted her weight, trying not to show how deeply the line touched her. The twins moved forward again, but a new issue surfaced moments later. Nathaniel began to fuss, rubbing his arm with increasing discomfort. "What's wrong, baby?" Alexis asked, kneeling. He sniffled. "It hurts." She gently lifted his sleeve, revealing a red patch near his elbow. Her eyes widened. "Did you fall earlier when we were rushing out of the house?" she asked. Nathaniel nodded. Alexis sighed, mostly at herself. She'd been so busy preparing the paperwork she needed to drop off, so focused on not being late, that she hadn't noticed the earlier scrape. "The skin's irritated," she murmured. "We need to clean it." Theodore stepped closer. "There's a pharmacy around the corner." "Let me get something." Alexis opened her mouth to decline, habit, not reasoning, but something in Theodore's expression stopped her. He wasn't trying to take over. He wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't trying to replace her. He simply wanted to help. She nodded cautiously. "Okay, but grab the gentlest option they have. His skin is sensitive. I'll be right back." Theodore jogged across the street, suit jacket catching the breeze as he moved through traffic with surprising agility for someone who normally lived in structured, controlled spaces. Alexis held the twins close, watching him disappear into the store. Inside her chest, something shifted. She wasn't ready to name it, but she felt it. "Mommy?" Caitlin asked, tugging her sleeve. "Is he coming back?" Alexis smoothed her daughter's curls. "Yes, baby. He said he would." The simple truth hung in the air. A few minutes later, Theodore returned, a small pharmacy bag in hand, breath a little uneven, hair slightly wind-tossed. He opened the bag and knelt again. "I got the mildest cleanser, some soft wipes, and a cream that's safe for sensitive skin," he said. Alexis blinked. "Did you read all the labels?" He nodded once. "I read every one. Twice." Caitlin giggled. "That's silly." "No," Nathaniel corrected importantly. "That's caring." Alexis felt the ground shift under her slightly. Her heart didn't crack open, but it loosened one stitch. Theodore cleaned the scrape gently, checking Nathaniel's face frequently to make sure he wasn't hurting him. "You doing okay?" he asked softly. Nathaniel nodded. "It tickles." Theodore smiled with a quiet exhale of relief. He applied a thin layer of cream, then secured a small bandage. "There," he said warmly. "Good as new." Nathaniel stared at the bandage like it was a badge of honor. "Thank you." "You're welcome," Theodore replied, brushing a thumb over the edge of the bandage with surprising tenderness. Alexis swallowed hard. This version of Theodore was different from the man she remembered. Not the polished air, not the charming perfection she once dated, not the man who avoided discomfort. This was someone present, someone grounded, someone who didn't flinch when parenting got messy. They walked again, this time at a slower pace. Theodore remained beside the twins, not crowding them but staying close enough to hear every question they thought of, and there were many. "Do you like pancakes? What's your favorite movie? Do you know how to whistle? Why are your shoes shiny?" He answered each one with patience and genuine curiosity. Alexis kept glancing at him, not because she didn't trust him, but because seeing him like this felt unfamiliar in the best way. At a crosswalk, the light turned red. They stopped. The twins instinctively reached for hands, Caitlin grabbing Alexis's, Nathaniel reaching for Theodore. He froze for half a second. Then he took Nathaniel's hand gently. Alexis watched the moment, despite herself. Nathaniel squeezed once. Theodore squeezed back. Something inside her chest warmed. When the light changed, and they crossed, She found herself leaning closer to Theodore, not intentionally, not romantically, but in that natural way two people lean toward a shared center. When they reached the car, she opened the back door and began helping the twins climb in. Theodore stood nearby, not assuming, simply waiting. "Thank you," she said quietly, surprising herself more than him. "For what?" he asked. "For today," she said. "For staying calm, for not making it about you, for showing up." His voice softened. "I meant it when I said I want to be consistent." "I know," she replied, "and I'm trying to believe it." The twins buckled in, whispering to each other. Theodore took a small step closer, still giving her space. "Alexis," he said gently, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance, a real one. The kind that happens in small moments like this, not big dramatic ones." She looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't the boy she once loved. He wasn't the man she feared he'd become. He was someone new, someone choosing the hard path, someone she didn't know how to reject. She nodded. "Small moments," she repeated softly. "We can start there." A breeze moved between them, carrying the city sounds and the soft laughter of their children. And for the first time, the future didn't look terrifying. It looked possible. The parking lot behind the corporate tower was quieter than the street they'd just left. Cars rolled in and out, but the noise didn't have the rush of the main road. It felt calmer, like a space made for transitions rather than destinations. Alexis opened the driver's side door and sat for a moment, her hand still gripping the edge of it. She didn't start the engine. She didn't turn to the twins yet. She just breathed. Theodore stood outside the car, watching her with a quiet patience that didn't exist in him years ago. He wasn't waiting for the perfect moment to make a grand speech. He didn't have an agenda. His posture, his eyes, his stillness, it all said the same thing. "I'm here when you're ready." Alexis eventually exhaled, slow and steady. "You know," she said softly, "today should have been simple." She wasn't talking to the twins. She wasn't talking to herself. She was talking to him. "I came downtown to drop off paperwork," she continued. "Just a regular morning, nothing unusual, nothing emotional. And instead," Theodore began gently, "and instead," she finished, "my entire past stepped into the elevator." Her voice didn't shake, but it carried years she hadn't spoken aloud. Theodore nodded. "I didn't expect my life to change today either." She gave a small, tired laugh. "Life doesn't check our calendars." The twins giggled in the back seat, still trapped in their own little world. They weren't worried about emotional breakthroughs. They were focused on a crumb one of them found in the seat cushion. Nathaniel held it up proudly. "Caitlin, look." Caitlin gasped for reasons only a 4-year-old could understand. "It's from breakfast." Alexis smiled despite herself. Theodore smiled too. Children had a way of making heavy moments breathe. Alexis shifted in her seat and finally looked at Theodore directly. "We should talk about what happens next," she said. He stepped closer, not too close, but closer. "I'm open to anything you suggest." "That's good," she replied, "because I'm not making decisions today, not big ones." He nodded. "I understand. But," she added, "I'm also not closing the door." That surprised him, not visibly, but in the way his shoulders straightened and his breath softened. "Alexis," he said quietly, "it means more than you know that you're willing to leave the door open." "I'm leaving it open a few inches," she corrected. "Not wide. Not even halfway." "That's enough," he said. "That's more than I deserve." She didn't argue with that. Instead, she watched him as he leaned slightly on the edge of the open car door. The sunlight caught the curve of his jaw, the shadow beneath his cheekbone. This was the same Theodore she once loved, but not the same man. The years had softened him where it mattered, and sharpened him where it counted. She looked away quickly, grounding herself. "We need to establish a routine for the twins," she said, shifting to the practical. "Consistency, predictability. I agree. You can start with weekends, one day, a few hours, nothing overwhelming. I'll be there," he promised. "And I need to see that you're comfortable taking care of them," she added. "That you can handle real parenting, not picture-perfect moments." "I want all of it," he said, without hesitation. "The good parts, the hard parts, the messy evenings, the tantrums. Everything." She studied him again. Her eyes weren't challenging him. They were measuring him, not against who he used to be, but who he might become. "And what about—" She paused, searching for the right phrasing. "Your previous relationship?" Theodore held her gaze. "I ended it completely. Today," she emphasized. You ended it today. Yes. And emotions don't evaporate in an hour. No, he agreed. But the relationship ended before today. Today just made it official. She inhaled slowly. She had always appreciated honesty, even when it was complicated. And us? She asked quietly. What do you think happens with us? He didn't rush to answer, didn't give some grand romantic speech, didn't reach for her hand. He took a breath and said, with a steadiness that touched her, I think we learn each other again, slowly, without pretending nothing happened, without forcing what isn't ready, without running from what might be possible. She felt that, deeply. Theodore, she whispered, her voice softer than she intended. I'm afraid. I know, he said. I'm afraid too. That surprised her. She'd never imagined him afraid of anything. What are you afraid of? She asked. That I'll be good for them, but not good enough for you. Her heart tightened. And you? He asked, voice gentler now. What scares you the most? That you'll wake up one day and realize this new version of you is temporary. His eyes softened with something real, something grounded. This isn't temporary, he said. Not the way I feel about being their father, and not the way I feel when I look at you. Alexis turned her face away, overwhelmed. She wasn't ready for declarations, but she wasn't rejecting them either. The twins interrupted again. Mommy, Caitlin called. Can he come with us today, just for a little? Alexis closed her eyes. The question cracked something inside her, the innocence of it, the simplicity. Theodore looked at her, not Caitlin, not asking her with his eyes, waiting. Alexis exhaled. I'm not ready for that yet, she said gently. Today has been too much. The twins nodded, accepting her boundaries without disappointment. Theodore did the same. I understand, he said. She reached for the car door, preparing to close it, but Theodore placed his hand gently on the edge, not stopping her, just wanting one more moment. Alexis, he said softly, I want to say something before you go. She looked at him. I love you, he said, not loudly, not dramatically, not with pressure, not with expectation, not with the past version of us. I love who you are now. I love the mother you've become, and I love the version of me that shows up when I'm around you. Her breath stilled. He stepped back, giving her space to reject every word. But she didn't. She leaned forward slightly, eyes warm but cautious. Theodore, she whispered, I won't say it back, not today. I'm not asking you to. But, she said, voice trembling, I don't want you to stop. A slow smile touched his lips, not triumphant, not cocky. Hopeful, real. He nodded once. I won't stop. Alexis closed the door gently and started the car. Through the window, the twins waved wildly. Theodore waved back, his smile small but sincere. As she drove away, something shifted inside her. Not a decision, not a commitment, not a promise. A door, opening gently, just enough for possibility to pass through. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever loved, lost, or wondered whether a second chance could change everything, share it with someone who understands how complicated love can be. You never know who needs it.